This show does not provide medical advice. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Anything you hear here should be discussed with your primary health care provider. Hello and welcome to Everyone Dies, the radio show produced by Passionate World Talk Radio, whose goal it is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Marianne Masso, and for the next 30 minutes, I am your host. So today, our topic is about colostomies, and this is a topic that often is not talked about in polite company. And I put the polite in air quotes because it's a very sensitive and intimate kind of thing that can happen. So let's just kind of break it down a little bit. The colon is the part of your body that absorbs water from the feces and returns that water, if you will, back into the system. And it moves through the stool, the feces, moves through the colon, through the intestines, and, comes out the anus in the form of a bowel movement. Now, a colonoscopy, or colostomy, excuse me, I said the wrong word there, colostomy is a surgical operation in which a piece of the colon is brought out in through the a surgical opening that's made in the abdominal wall to bypass a damaged part of the colon. So how does the colon get damaged? Well, it can get damaged in colorectal cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian, uterine, or cervical cancer. Also, people with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or precancerous colon polyps may need to have a colostomy. So those are the diseases that can result in needing to have a colostomy done. So when that piece of colon is brought out through the abdominal wall, that means that the stool, the feces is going to come out into that pouch. And that needs to be emptied and cared for and worn. So we're going to talk with Chris Berry today, who was diagnosed 10 years ago with colon cancer and had his colostomy about 10 years ago. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Marianne. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So you're unique in lots of different ways, I'm finding out. One is that you were training for an Ironman marathon, which those of you who don't know what an Ironman marathon is, a bike, swim, and run race of incredible proportions. How many miles are each of those?
Well, it's in total, it's 140.6 miles, so it's a long day for the person doing it, and in my case, I was kind of slow, so a long day for my family to wait for me to finish, but I was able to get it done, so it was a good day.
So the swimming part is what, 2 miles?
Yeah, a little over 2 miles, and then the bike ride is 112 miles, and then at the end, then after that bike ride, you get on you hit the road and start a full marathon, 26.2 miles. So it's a long day.
Yeah, I'm just imagining, maybe the swimming, but after that, it'd be time for hot dogs and hamburgers for me. So you were training for this, had your cancer diagnosis, did your treatment, had your colostomy, and then you ran this marathon. So for anybody who has a colostomy or anybody who's trying to think about it, they're saying, so how the heck do you do that when you have a colostomy? So if you can take us back to when you first had that surgery and some of your thoughts and how you figured out how to adapt that appliance. Some people name their colostomies. I don't know if you did, but you can tell us that. How did you adapt to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't name it. I've talked to a lot of people who have named their stoma. They give it a kind of friendly name that Charlie is, doing this or that. I did when I went back to work. A person that I worked with quite a bit, and occasionally your stoma can make noise, particularly as you're getting kind of used to it in the most inopportune moments in a quiet conference room. And while I didn't name it, I did say that every time it made noise, I would turn to my friend Rebecca and say, "Man, Rebecca, that was loud," and blame the noise on her. So I guess in some ways maybe I named it that. I don't know. She was a good sport about it. But anyway, so yeah, first of all, when I found out I had to have I was going to have an ostomy surgery, and then, really pretty quickly realized it wouldn't be reversible. Sometimes it's reversible. Sometimes you can have the surgery, they bypass the damaged part, do your treatment, and then you can be reconnected and you function, as you did before. In my case, I knew they were going to have to remove so many pieces and parts that it just wouldn't be an option. It would be a permanent lifestyle change for me. And I'll be honest, in the first day, it was kind of devastating because for all the reasons you said, I sort of couldn't imagine almost a worse thing, and since then I've talked with people, and perhaps you have too, and maybe others, where people say, well, I just don't think I'd like to live with that. I never quite went there, but it was just hard to contemplate. And then when you you go and you Google the images, it's shocking to see, honestly, what that's going to look like. A piece of your intestine is going to, protrude through your abdominal wall. And, it's unusual to see your insides on your outside. And,
right.
It's a very, graphic kind of image. And so for a few days it was kind of hard to contemplate. But I will say, one, kind of knowing that the alternative was, death, that helps you get over it pretty fast, I think. And then also just sort of realizing, maybe this will be like wearing glasses. If you're a kid and you have to wear glasses, you think that's going to be terrible, these things sitting on my face, or, all kinds of other things that, people have to live with. And I was fortunate that my doctor connected me with a firefighter in Chicago who within a couple of days. And he told me, look, it's not fun. I'm not going to tell you it's fun, but I'm back to being a firefighter. And let me tell you about, what that's been like. And a lot of people worry about relationships and, intimacy and all of those things that you kind of also, then you kind of go there and like, wow, that's going to be strange, not just for me, but, my family and my spouse. And so anyway, I was fortunate that somebody connected me and allowed me to talk with someone who told me there is life after this, but it is shocking. So just in general, that was kind of the first part. And then it wasn't until really I kind of got through the treatment. My treatment was some chemotherapy, some radiation, surgery, and then more chemotherapy. So my treatment was pretty much a year of just kind of like lots of people have experienced. You jump on the roller coaster and you just go with it. And then when I finished, then I had been training with some friends who said, hey, let's pick back up with this and talked about it with my family. And we sort of said it as, after finishing this treatment, if I could, get back to the point where I could do this Ironman triathlon, that would sort of be the end of it. That would kind of be the capstone where it was like, okay, a year of treatment, I had about 14 months to train for the Ironman, and if I could finish that, we could sort of feel like we put this, behind us. So that's how we ended up putting it on the calendar, and that's the way it worked out, which was just awesome to have the whole family there at the finish line, and be able to. We really felt like it was kind of all of us putting it behind us.
That's incredible. How long did the Ironman take you?
Well, a good triathlete can do it in under 10 hours. It took me about 15 hours. You get 17 hours to finish. If you finish in 17 hours and 1 second, you didn't finish. You did all of it, but you didn't finish. There is a time limit. They don't give you all the time, and then there are checkpoints along the course. You have to be done with the swim at a certain time and done with the bike at a certain time. One is just making sure people don't get overwhelmed and distressed, but the other is they want to make sure you have you've got to be able to finish it in a reasonable time period. So it's a long day, but and you get I'll make one quick diversion here because it's occurred to me a number of times. So you'll find I ramble. Sorry. I will say here's one of the things that really, because I had not done the full Ironman before, but I'd done shorter triathlon distances. I'd done some half Ironmans, which are 70.3 miles, which is still a long day. But here's what I discovered was cancer treatment. If you get the full, you end up with the full program, the radiation, surgery, and chemotherapy. It's 3 stages, 3 things that happen. Well, a triathlon, it's swim, bike, run. And it's funny, I never would have imagined that the years of doing the triathlon, which put me in good physical shape right before I encountered this colon cancer challenge, which I know was enormously helpful to go into that really, really fit, was really helpful to me physically. But I never expected that mentally it would be so helpful, because the model that you have in your head, like, is for a triathlon is so similar to the cancer treatment. You start out and the race is going to start, and that's when you get diagnosed with your cancer, and then they tell you you're going to have these 3 things, radiation, surgery, chemo. And same with a triathlon. You start out and it's going to be swim, bike, run. So you're really excited at the start of both races, both events, and you're nervous and excited, and you jump in. By the end of the swim, you're like, oh my God, I am ready to get out of the water. This is a long time to be swimming. I was excited when I got in, and it's not so good. And there things happen. You get kicked in the face, by someone, or your, goggles come off, or you go off course or something, particularly if you're not a talented swimmer like I'm not. And but at the end, you're kind of worn out on the swim, and that's the way it is. Like with radiation, the first stage, by the end of the 20-some cycles for me of radiation, I was like, okay, I don't want to go and have radiation anymore. And then you get a little break, and in the triathlon, that's called transition, T1, transition from swim to bike. So you come back, you get your swim stuff, you put your bike stuff over your swim stuff, you get your bike shoes on, get your sunglasses, your bike helmet, get all your nutrition, your hydration, you get on your bike and you take off. Well, that's kind of, you get a little break between radiation and surgery, to recover a little bit. And so that's the transition in cancer. Then by that point, you're kind of excited for the next thing. It's like, oh, good, I'm glad to be on the bike. This is, get out there and start riding my bike. Well, same with that. It's like I'm weirdly happy to be onto the surgery next phase of this thing, and you do the surgery. And then at the end of that, you're like, wow, that was kind of hard. Now I'm recovering from that, and you're on pain meds, and you're like, wow, now I've got this, thing through my abdomen, and a lot of parts were removed, and it's kind of like the bike and the triathlon. You're like, now I'm ready to get off the bike. Then you get another little break between surgery and chemo, and same with that. And then you start the run in a triathlon, or you start chemo. And so I guess what helped me mentally was that model of, you're going to go through these, it's one big long race, but it has these 3 phases, and you're going to be on this up and down of excited to start the next phase, worn out at the end of that phase, get a little break, kind of excited to start the next phase. Cumulatively, though, each one piles up on you. So by the time you finish the 3rd one, you're like, okay, now it's not just one thing, it's 3, but it's very satisfying to, finish the 3. So that really stuck with me. Like, wow, that was a very helpful mental model to know that this isn't just random ups and downs. This is kind of what happens when you go through a multi-step race or a multi-phase treatment. So.
That is really a good way to conceptualize, for those people who are listening, even if you don't have a colostomy, but if you're going through multiple stages like that, and you could even apply it to, child raising, going through the staying up all night, and then except I think child raising doesn't really ever end, but that's a whole other story, right, Chris?
Yes.
So how did you figure out how to run an Ironman with a colostomy? Because like I've said, that's a bag hanging on the outside of your body. How did you do that?
I started to do, well, first I asked my doctor and my my WOCN, wound care and ostomy nurses. These are amazing nurses that specialize in helping people with all kinds of wound cares, but and an ostomy is basically an open wound. I think at first I was kind of like, well, why is it a wound care nurse? Well, and if you think about it, you you have an opening and your intestine is coming. So it is like a wound, but it's not a wound in a bad way. It's a wound in a good way. And so talking with them, they were a little perplexed, and I've since talked with other people who have, done marathons or triathlons with ostomies and had similar experiences where it's not quite that common, but it's becoming, maybe a little more as people get more and more active and want to do all these things. But I started with them, and they said, well, you should be able to do that, but honestly, we can't really tell you, exactly how to. So I started doing a lot of just research, looking for products that might help me, that would help the appliance, stay on when you get, really wet and sweaty and are really moving around. So both looking at some of the manufacturers and I happen to use the Hollister products. So kind of looking at their product line and just, kind of finding what were more durable versions of their adhesive, which they offer, some varieties. And so doing
let me just interrupt you right there. I'm sorry, but for those people who are listening, when we talk about an appliance, I don't know what image is coming into the uninitiated mind, but the appliance is that plastic bag that has like a sticky part on it, correct, and there's a collar that there's different ways that these work, but they can snap on. Because right, if you're taking something on and off your skin's going to get very sore. And so there's these kind of two parts, one that sticks on the skin and doesn't get changed that frequently, and then there's the other part that kind of snaps onto it. And the problems that people typically have is that one part or the other comes off, it doesn't fit tightly enough so that there's leakage, the skin gets sore from the adhesive, and so these are the when you're trying to find the right appliance for you and your skin and the place in your colon where the surgery has been done, it can be kind of complicated and take a while to find the right appliance. Is that a good explanation, Chris?
Boy, that is an excellent explanation. You have obviously spent time with a lot of people who have an ostomy. So yeah, you're exactly right. Mechanically, that's the way it works. It's just designed to stick to your skin, but not force you to peel that off as often. And so then there's a part that's almost like Tupperware that kind of clicks on there. And a lot of people, honestly have a perception, particularly if they maybe had a parent or a grandparent back in this sort of stone age of this, think, oh my gosh, it's a terrible thing. The technology is really amazing. I mean, the adhesive technology, the plastic technology, for all of there's three really big manufacturers and then a number of other ones. They really don't think if someone has an ostomy or is going to get one and they think I'm going to smell bad, I'm going to be messy all the time, I can't do the things I want to do. No, that absolutely should not be your expectation. And if that's your experience, go see your ostomy nurse, start experimenting with different products. There are products out there that will work for you. For some reason, some people's skin, accepts or rejects certain adhesives. Some people's shape of their body or their shape of their stoma, when the surgeon creates it, makes it more problematic. But if you're don't go into it thinking that this means you're going to be a smelly person who cannot function in the real world. You should be able to resume really close to normal life. And if you can't, that's a sign you need to. All these companies will send samples to you, get samples, try things, experiment, and then when you find what works, stick with it. But ask people. If you're having a bad experience, ask people, because you should not live with a bad experience. I mean, in addition to doing these physical activities, I had a job that required that I traveled all around the world. So I would go to China for, weeks with an ostomy. I'd fly to Shanghai, and yes, that was a little stressful at first, but you have to kind of be prepared and, get organized. But, you can do everything you could do before. And if you're not, then do research, talk with people, and get there, because you should be able to.
And don't take no for an answer. So one of the things that Chris was telling me is that he he has specific needs in terms of being able to do the Ironman. And so you found a company that, what exactly did they make? It was some sort of belt, you said?
Yeah, I tried. I looked to see, because even no matter how well the basic appliance works, the part that sticks to you, and then the pouch that collects and is detachable and disposable as much as you need to dispose of it, that collects the output. As output collects in it, it can be, it's obviously there's going to be some weight and some mass in there, and that creates two issues for people. One is visibility. If you're wearing tighter clothing or any clothing and output begins to come into that pouch, you begin to feel like it's getting visible, and you don't, you may be at work or out and about, and it makes you self-conscious. You kind of feel like, I think people can see that there's something on my abdomen. So having some sort of a garment of some sort, and in this case, what I found worked well for me is something called a stealth belt, which basically is a pretty, as it turns out, more sophisticated than I imagined wrap, but works really well to not put so much pressure on the appliance that it restricts the function of it, the flow and the function, but put some just enough on it so that it is less visible. It's more discreet. So that's one thing that lots of people are very interested in. And then the other is just, if you're going to be active, like think about running or think about doing yoga or swimming, if there's output in that, it becomes either a weight that can kind of bounce and begin to pull the device away from your body, no matter how strong the adhesive is, or it can be, it can just be uncomfortable to have that kind of weight. So it supports the little bit of weight that happens in that output. So I tried a number of different things. I found this is the product that worked really well for me, and that's what I use to do, to do really all of my activities, daily wear, sleeping. There are several different, kind of versions of not just this company's, but other companies, and there are a number of companies that make products like this, but some that are really, really good for swimming and surfing. The Richard O'Hamel, the person who invented this, is a surfer, and so he's made one that's made out of neoprene, and you can surf the big waves, and this thing will not come off, and then all the way down to something that is very lightweight and you can sleep in very comfortably. So kind of like the products from Hollister and other companies, look around, find what works for you. And you have to experiment, just a little bit. But I found to do any kind of activity like this, I needed something beyond just the basic appliance that was going to hang from my body. I needed something that provided more, more support.
So does the bag that hangs from your body go into this belt?
It does. So and so if people do a little research, they'll see there are really kind of two sort of varieties. One is, if you think about like a pregnancy band that you could buy, anywhere that's pretty inexpensive, that you just would slip up, a woman would slip up over her abdomen. That's sort of the low end of keeping the product or keeping the device less visible, because it's this piece of stretch fabric that goes over. The downside is it presses uniformly all the way around your body. What's interesting about the stealth belt, or made it work well for me and for other, and again, other companies make these, is that the pouch actually goes inside, or the collection pouch goes inside almost like an envelope that has a zippered opening. So there's a backing on it that's kind of tight, that's tight against your abdomen, but it has a hole cut through it for the stoma to come through. And then there's a different kind of fabric, a different tension on the outside that still puts some pressure on the pouch, so that it is supported and less visible, but not so much pressure that if you think about if you put your hand right on top of that stoma, you would restrict the output. So that's what makes it a little more sophisticated than just a pregnancy band, and honestly a little more expensive, which some people request. That's a lot of money. And so, but it works. What it does is support, conceal, but it does it and still allows it to, to function well. And I think if you add it up, people look at that and say, oh my gosh, I might pay, $100 for something like that. But it's going to last you, depending on how often you wear it and what kinds of things you do. If you're swimming in salt water, a little less. If you go and swimming every day in salt water, on the other hand, if you're using it for yoga, it's going to last you, a couple of years. I have some that are 3 or 4 years old. So it's like 5 cents a day, to kind of get your life back, or something like that. Or, you pay more for socks, so if you think of it that way. So anyway, for me, it was well worth it. Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, I tried that. It worked well for me after trying a couple of different things, and then I used it to train. And then the other, considerations were just, well, what do you do when you're out on a long bike ride and, no matter what, it's just time to do some medical maintenance. So I learned how to get very comfortable taking all the supplies I might need with me on a long bike or run, being able to change it on the road if I had to. So I had to learn how to do it not in front of the bathroom mirror, but standing on the roadside, maybe somewhere, which I got to tell you is a real showstopper. If a car goes by while you're changing out of bed, they are going to look at you a little funny, like what the heck's going on there. But it doesn't happen very often. But those are the two things really, is just find what works for you, and then just be prepared for any eventuality, because it could happen that despite the best laid plans, your stoma is going to get active in the middle of a long run or bike, and you're going to have to maybe deal with a little maintenance while you're out there, and you can't be paralyzed by that.
Right. So the other thing that I hear when I talk with people who have colostomies is issues about body image, and I worked primarily with women in the the gynecological cancer group, which is another big group that can end up with colostomies and not feeling sexy, or not feeling like they could wear clothes that they normally would have worn. Do you have any insights in terms of, did you go through that period where you thought, well, I don't look so good anymore, or feelings like that?
Yes. So I'd say I think you're right that I think it's probably a little bigger issue, maybe for women, although maybe not. I don't know. It's maybe a sexist thing to say. I'm not sure. Anyway, but definitely I had those feelings too. I mean, it's hard to feel. I'm married, and I got to tell you, if you look at yourself in the mirror when you get home, and it looks quite medical, and I will say it's not the most attractive look you've ever kind of gone for. So it's shocking again, to kind of see this thing that is right there in your abdomen, and it's the device the pouch is not huge. There are different sizes. You can get small ones or big ones, but it's still very, very different than you used to look, and it's honestly, it's disturbing. So I think everybody goes through that, and then you begin to think, well, okay, how do I deal with this? That's it's another reason that some of the companies that are out there, in addition to trying to address the functional aspects of having an ostomy, being able to do yoga or not have it show underneath a shirt at work. If you're wearing dress clothes or something or anything, you don't want it to show underneath. But the next level of that is if you're standing there, with no clothes on, is there a way you can also deal with that body image? And so there are companies that make, for women and for men and women, unisex, either like the Stealth Belt makes a belt that's for kind of sleeping in, that it not only supports the device, but it hides it kind of. It's inside that envelope, in the same way that envelope kind of supports it. It also covers it, and so it just looks less medical. It looks like, for a man, it looks like you're wearing a black cummerbund of a tuxedo, which I prefer to, what you'd see if it's not there. There are companies out there, though, a number of them in the U.S. and in the UK, that also make specifically for women, where they're more lacy. They really try and integrate lingerie into a design that's more high-waisted, or some kind of a band or a device that looks kind of like a stealth belt but has a lacy cover on it, and stealth belt even makes one that has kind of a lacy cover on it. So definitely that's an issue. And I will say, I think it's an underappreciated issue. I think until you've stood in the mirror when you've gotten out of the shower and you look at yourself in the mirror and you think about what you used to look like, and then you think about now with this new medical device that's, your potentially your lifetime buddy hanging there, then it hits you, I don't know if is there some way I can make that less visible? For me and my wife, Carol, a big part of it was just talking about it, and she's just amazing. We've been on this journey together, every step of the way, and that was something we, just kind of worked through together, and eventually you kind of realize, well, this is the new normal, and you figure it out, and so it's not been at all an issue for us, other than just trying to get used to the new normal, and then figuring out what worked for us, and like I said before, I guess that's another issue that's solvable. And if you don't think it's solvable, keep working. You can find something that will make you feel comfortable, feel functional, like the way you look. You won't look the same as you did, but you can find something that will make you like the way you look. And I counsel people through a cancer organization, and sometimes they're a little younger and they're dating. And my gosh, I'd been married for quite a long time. Talk about a confidence shaker if you're a teenager, and unfortunately, children and teenagers have to have this surgery sometimes. So think about trying to date and court and marry. That's much much going to produce a lot more anxiety than just adjusting to a long-term relationship. So but people do it, and there's no reason you can't. And anyway, it's an issue, but it's a solvable issue.
What do you think is the, in terms of for yourself and for the people you've talked to and counseled, what do you think is like the biggest barrier to moving on with your life? So you have a disease, you have the colostomy. Do people, like you said, well, I figured it out, we worked it through, and a year later you ran an Ironman marathon. For the other people that you've talked to, what keeps them from moving on? Or is there anything that does keep them from moving on? Is it just a matter of time for people?
Everything from what you just said. I'm acquainted with a young guy who was captain of the UC Berkeley track team and had to have his colon removed and has an ostomy. And in the middle of his, junior or senior season at Berkeley, had to have this happen, and then came back and was able to compete again in the NCAAs. And his name's Colin Jarvis. He's an amazing guy, and he is working right now to break the 4-minute mile with an ostomy. He's run what is the fastest marathon ever recorded for someone with an ostomy, and he just since he's gotten married, he was dating a young woman when he went through all this, and just a year ago they were married, and he's just living a complete full life. He got derailed, but he jumped right back on. On the other hand, I've also been matched up with people who have had cancer and had the surgery. And I talked with a gentleman in Los Angeles a few years ago who hadn't been out of his house in 2 years because he was just convinced that life with an ostomy, you just couldn't go out of the house. He had never learned to care for it himself, so he couldn't go anywhere without his wife. And he was so self-conscious of the kind of body image, and he just talked himself into this was a debilitating condition that left him homebound. And so I think it's everything in between. And the key again is I think people just have to don't accept some antiquated view that you might have had if an old relative had an ostomy, and and that you're not going to be able to live a functional life. There are products and people who can help you, and you just have to, push yourself to get the best possible solution you can, and not accept it as a something that's going to limit your life. And I think that's the difference, I guess, between people who get out and decide to reclaim their lives and people who feel debilitated by it. I will say it's difficult to get information. There's a lot of, like a lot of things, I suppose, there's all kinds of information out there, but to try and really understand that. So I think just going out, maybe looking for examples of people like, well, if, my gosh, if Colin Jarvis can train for a 4-minute mile, if Richard O'Hamel can go surf the big waves, then you can do these things, and try and find a way to do it.
You can go to Walmart, right?
Then you can go to Walmart. Yeah, start with the cheap one. If you just go get and then see, and if that works for you, awesome. It's a $20 belly band, and if that works for you, perfect. Now you're off and going, and you feel better about everything. If if it doesn't quite work for you, then find what does, and remember, it's your life, so don't get too hung up on, oh my gosh, am I going to really pay $65 or something? Is it worth it to kind of get your life back and go and do things? So don't accept that limitation, I guess, is what I would say.
And we can, if you have the time and energy to kind of compile your list, or if you have a list of resources, I think we should post those so that people don't have to start at square one. They can start at square two, since you did square one already. And Chris did tell me that he invested in some of these companies because they were helpful to him. So, but these kinds of companies don't make tons of money either, because it's a very specialized market, right, Chris?
It is, and the idea of investing was actually just primarily to help, kind of to your last question, Marianne, honestly, is it's hard to reach out to people. It's hard to make people aware, because there's just so much, there are between 800,000 and 1 million people in the U.S. with ostomies, and a small fraction of them end up, being able to find, the things that may work for them. And so the idea of helping a couple of these companies was to help them reach more people, because when people find a solution, it's amazing every day, the emails that come, to these companies where they're like, oh, I can't believe it. This has changed my life. I can go out and do things. And so that's the idea, really. It's not a highly, kind of profitable thing. It's more how can some of these companies who have solutions that can help people, how can more people find out about them and make their lives better? And that's the rewarding part of it. So, yep.
Well,
but I'd be happy to help compile some resources.
If you put that together, then people
Sure.
can go to our webpage and kind of move from your starting point. Any last thoughts you want to give us about what you've learned or what you think people need to know?
No, I think you teed it up really well. It's one of those, it's an icky conversation, and that's the look most people, or if you, hey, would you like to hear about my ostomy? I've often thought, when I first had cancer, I remember at one point and had to have an ostomy. Another thought I had was, why couldn't I have, although this probably would have been, certainly more terrible, but like having maybe my leg amputated and getting one of those cool metal blades on my leg, that like cool, the Blade Runner, high-tech artificial leg, that if I have to have something removed.
Now those are sexy.
Yeah, exactly. Nice titanium leg, carbon fiber, super fast. And I thought that would be cool, because that people would walk up to you on the street if you're wearing shorts and go, wow, that's really cool. You lift up your shirt and show them your ostomy, and they're like, I don't really want to talk about that. And so I did have that kind of, like, there are cooler things to have. So I think the big part of the conversation is just get over that. And honestly, everybody, this is something, the the most basic bodily function you have right after eating. And so get over it, get over the ick factor, and then just, solve the problem. But don't.
Yeah,
I found
poops
very
first.
quickly. Yeah, exactly. That's the book I was just thinking of for my kids. So. But anyway, that should be the title of this, I guess. Everybody poops. But
yeah,
anyway,
as popular as Everyone Dies.
Yeah, that's true. That's the other. Excuse me. We all do those things.
Oh, I'm going to kill Chris with my great wit and humor here.
But no, I appreciate the chance to chat about it and hopefully share some information that'll help people a little bit. And if nothing else, just to don't accept a huge limitation on your life. It should not be limited by this.
That's right. You didn't, go through that radiation and that surgery and that chemo to stay home. You went through all that so you could live your life. And so figure out how to do that and live your best life. Ostomy or not, right?
Wow. Well said. I could not add anything to that.
Well, thank you, Chris, for letting me talk to you about this. And thank you for everyone for spending time with me during our show, Everyone Dies. You can read our blogs and listen to our podcasts at everyonedies.org. That's EBERY, the number 1 dies.org. Thank you to our producer, Jeanne White, and our CEO, Lillian Caldwell. We produce a new show every Wednesday to answer your questions related to life-threatening illness, dying, and death. Remember, you can listen to Passionate World Talk Radio on Spreaker and our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss on our show, please email Marianne at everyonedies.org. That's Marianne, MARIANNE, at everyonedies.org, EBERY, the number 1, dies.org. Our thanks to Chris for his insights about colostomies, and we're going to post the list of resources on our webpage at everyonedies.org. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I hope that you live your best life every day, and remember that every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.